December 17th, 1944, near Stavelot, Belgium. The fuel gauge read empty, and Joachim Peiper, commander of the 1st SS Panzer Division, already knew. Through his periscope, he watched American trucks streaming along a distant road, each consuming more fuel in an hour than his entire column now possessed. His Tiger II sat immobilized, its vast 860-liter tank drained just 3 kilometers from the greatest prize of Operation Whacked am Rhine, a massive American fuel depot near Spa, holding over 2 million gallons of gasoline. Later, in post-war testimony, Peiper would remember with bitterness. We could smell the fuel. The greatest depot in Belgium lay just beyond our reach. My machines sat like monuments to our failure. Perfect engines, useless without gasoline. What Peiper glimpsed was more than fuel. It was the chasm between two armies, one drowning in abundance, the other starving at the edge of its final gamble. The Wehrmacht had begged, borrowed, and stolen just enough to launch Hitler's desperate offensive through the Ardennes. They had 6 days of operations at most, enough fuel to reach perhaps halfway to Antwerp under fire. The rest, Hitler insisted, would come from capturing American stocks. It was a fantasy written in liters and gallons. German diaries recorded the cruel arithmetic: 90 miles of fuel for tanks, but Antwerp lay 125 miles away. Panthers consumed gallons by the minute. Tigers drank double when forced off-road. Their advance depended not on strategy but on theft. We were not soldiers, Peiper admitted. We were fuel thieves. Meanwhile, the Americans built the most extraordinary supply system in history. Their trucks consumed more fuel delivering fuel than the entire German army possessed for combat. To the Germans, every jerrycan was life. To the Americans, fuel was counted by the shipload. While Peiper's tanks sputtered dry, the Allies moved fuel as if it were water. The Red Ball Express, a fleet of 6,000 trucks, thundered day and night along highways reserved solely for supply. African-American drivers formed the backbone of this lifeline, hauling more than 400,000 tons of cargo in just 82 days. Lieutenant Charles Wofford of the 3,632nd Truck Company recalled, "My company alone moved 50,000 gallons on a good day. We burned 300,000 gallons just keeping our trucks running. More fuel wasted delivering fuel than the Germans had for fighting." Numbers told the story. Patton's Third Army and Hodges's first consumed 800,000 gallons daily in their dash across France. The Germans, who dreamed of capturing 5 million gallons, faced the reality that the Americans burned more than that every week without blinking. And then came Pluto. Operation Pipeline under the ocean, threaded flexible pipes beneath the English Channel, pumping up to 1 million gallons a day into Europe. By December 1944, a web of 3,000 miles of pipelines snaked through France and Belgium, feeding depots like veins feeding a giant. Captain Bernard Williams, an oil engineer overseeing Pluto, marveled. "We pump 3,000 tons of fuel daily through underwater pipes. The Germans count barrels. We measure by tanker ships." The depots near Spa and Stavelot embodied this abundance. One held 2.2 million gallons, another over 1 million more, together more fuel than the Germans had for their entire offensive. Staff Sergeant James Morrison of the 25th Quartermaster Battalion described them: "Mountains of jerrycans stacked like pyramids, trucks lined in rows. Another 200,000 gallons arrived yesterday," the captain said. "Stack it higher." When Peiper's tanks drew close, the Americans simply torched what they couldn't move. Over 120,000 gallons went up in smoke, wasted with a shrug. The German offensive advanced not on strategy but on fumes. Orders were simple: drive until the tanks stopped, then steal American fuel. At Bulge on December 17th, Peiper's men stumbled upon a miracle: an American dump with 50,000 gallons. Jerrycans stacked like pyramids, trucks abandoned with keys in the ignition. Soldiers filled every tank and container like men dying of thirst. But the victory was hollow. 50,000 gallons might sound vast, yet it would barely move a panzer battalion to the Meuse. And the fuel itself revealed another painful truth. Americans bore neat octane ratings, 80, 85, 100. High grade for planes, medium for trucks, specialized blends for each engine. The Germans had only synthetic gasoline of poor quality, corrosive to engines, robbing performance. At Bulge, Peiper's troops also seized 50 American prisoners. Desperation turned to atrocity. The captives were forced to refuel German vehicles, then executed in what became known as the Malmedy Massacre. Survivor William Merrican remembered. They were in a hurry, checking watches, arguing about fuel. They killed us because we would slow them down. They couldn't afford delay. Still, fuel slipped through their fingers. Every demolished bridge forced detours, burning what little remained. Engineers of the 291st Battalion blew spans at the Ambulve and the Salm just as German armor approached. Captain John Wilson recalled watching Tigers grind to a halt. Magnificent machines, but running on fumes. Each bridge we dropped stole miles from their tanks. By December 19th, Peiper's spearhead had clawed forward less than 50 miles. His Tigers and Panthers, mechanical marvels, sat crippled by thirst within sight of Spa's massive depot. Luftwaffe transports tried parachuting barrels of gasoline. Most burst on impact. A handful reached the panzers, enough for 10 tanks to crawl 10 miles. The great steel beasts were dying, not in fire, but in silence. By Christmas Eve, Peiper's mighty column was finished. He had begun with 4,800 men and 117 tanks. Now he abandoned 6 King Tigers, 13 Panthers, and dozens of other armored vehicles, engines flawless, guns ready, but fuel tanks bone dry. We walked out like beggars, he later testified, while Americans drove past in endless columns. The contrast was crushing. German crews siphoned drops from wrecks while American soldiers idled Shermans all night just to stay warm. Jeeps drove 2 blocks rather than walking. Generators powered floodlights, projectors, even coffee makers. To the starving enemy, it looked like mockery. Private Anthony Caruso recalled dumping hundreds of gallons of old gasoline. Germans watching us nearly rioted. One begged to fill his canteen with what we poured away. Captain Robert Johnson observed, "We burned more fuel last night to keep warm than a German panzer company possessed for combat." Everywhere, the Americans turned fuel into infrastructure. Engineers laid pipelines behind the advancing front, 100,000 gallons a day flowing forward like lifeblood. We laid pipe across the battlefield while German bodies were still warm, Captain Eugene Smith admitted. The war itself seemed to run on gasoline. The relief of Bastogne proved it. Patton's Third Army pivoted 90 degrees in 3 days, burning 800,000 gallons in the maneuver, more than the Germans had for their entire offensive. Colonel Walter Muller recorded Patton's response when asked about fuel. "Stop counting. Start driving." Meanwhile, German divisions sat immobilized within sight of Bastogne, engines dead, their crews begging headquarters for gasoline that no longer existed. Even surrounded paratroopers in Bastogne had fuel dropped by parachute, 5,000 gallons at a time, in canisters designed to bounce on impact. German prisoners shook their heads. "You fly gasoline. You have so much you fly it." For the Germans, it was not defeat by battle. It was defeat by arithmetic. By late December, the German offensive collapsed in silence. Across the Ardennes, crews abandoned 15,000 vehicles, most not destroyed in battle, but drained of fuel. King Tiger 332, one of the most powerful tanks ever built, sat deserted near La Glise. Its commander, Kurt Nispel, Germany's greatest tank ace, wrote bitterly, "Engine perfect, gun operational, armor intact, but the fuel tank is empty. We are defeated by absence, the absence of gasoline." Captured officers admitted the truth. One quartermaster confessed, "Your smallest depot holds more fuel than my entire division." Another declared, "This is not war. It is industrial annihilation. American abundance seemed infinite. Eisenhower's staff reported 42 million gallons in reserve, with 1.5 million more arriving daily. A single U.S. refinery in Texas outproduced Germany's entire synthetic fuel industry. For every gallon Germany scraped together, America delivered 100. The arithmetic was merciless. Germany had enough fuel to move its tanks halfway to Antwerp. America burned more in a week than Germany possessed for the entire campaign. Every bridge blown, every detour, every wasted mile tightened the noose. Courage and tactics could not conjure gasoline from empty tanks. The Battle of the Bulge proved the future of war. It was not fought only by tank crews and infantry, but by refinery workers, truck drivers, and pipeline engineers. It was won not in the frozen forests of Belgium, but in the oil fields of Texas and the convoys crossing the Atlantic. As Peiper's men trudged home on foot, American columns rolled past, engines rumbling, fuel flowing endlessly. German tanks became steel monuments to scarcity. American jeeps and trucks became symbols of victory through abundance. In the Ardennes, the final lesson of modern war was written in gasoline. The army with the most fuel wins.